Welcome to Hello Port Hueneme. I'm your host Tom Dunn, and we're with Councilmember Tom Figg. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
And we're doing the City Council review for May 7th, was it, I believe?
Correct.
May 7th, and we're just going to go over what some of the items that the council discussed and give you a precise version of a 3-hour meeting. And the first thing we're going to talk about is that in the beginning you gave an inspirational speech or topic, and that's what each council member does at certain meetings, and yours was about the museum and Larry and Roberta. And would you tell the people what has happened there?
It was a difficult intro. We call it the inspiration, and in this case, because Larry and his wife, now deceased, Roberta, had been an inspiration in the resurrection of the Port Hueneme Museum, Historical Museum. Sadly, she passed away just a day before the council meeting, and so I dedicated the inspiration to acknowledging her contributions, her selfless contributions to the community, and how much we're going to dearly miss her. And we adjourned the meeting in her honor, and have asked that the minutes reflect that, and that Larry Downing, her husband, be provided signed copies of those minutes in her memory. So it was tough because both Larry and Roberta have been such inspirations to the community. So even though it was an inspirational part of the agenda, it was heartwarming and heartfelt and tragic. But we all grieve for Larry and his loss, and the community as well for Roberta's departure. So enough said.
Well, I'd like to say something too, in that at about the time that Hello Port Hueneme started, I met Larry. And at that time, he was just getting his foot going, he and Roberta, in restoring the museum. And I watched them, and I had no idea what Hello Port Hueneme would turn into, or whether it be one show or whatever. But as I watched those two people work at the museum tirelessly, day after day after day, and bring it to what it is now, that was my inspiration also, to keep going. And hey, you make a mistake here, you don't do something you thought you should, but you just keep going ahead. And it was them that allowed me to have the inspiration that, hey, if you just work hard enough, it can get done. So I'm glad you brought that up to everybody.
Yeah, the irony was that my intent for that piece of the agenda was to provide a 5-minute clip of the Citizen of the Year, well actually it was awards that were presented by the Chamber back in March for recognizing an assortment of people, including yourself.
9 or 10 total people, you know.
And the irony is that both Roberta and Larry were anointed that honor a year prior. And I just didn't feel comfortable in broadcasting this latest award ceremony because of the circumstance. So Roberta will be dearly missed, and I wish the best to Larry, and I know there's a lot of well wishers out there that feel likewise.
I think he has a lot of support, and I think based on an article and some stuff that went out, we asked for people to come down and not necessarily give money, but give time and effort. And
well, since you mentioned that, and true to form, Larry has asked that if those that wish to, you know, in lieu of flowers, to donate what they can afford for the continued efforts of upgrading the museum, and that's just true to form for the Downings. And so, for those that might not have heard that request, I think that would be a wonderful way to celebrate her life.
I think I referred to it when I first saw it and met Larry and Roberta as the hidden jewel in Port Hueneme. And since they've been doing it, it's not hidden as much anymore.
Yeah.
So that's really nice. Thank you, Tom.
Sure.
just want to let you know a couple things. Sort of along with that. The museum is going to host the Veterans Memorial Day service in front of City Hall at 9 o'clock on Monday the 28th. So all of you that want to come out and thank all the veterans for their services, that's the date and time that that'll be there. And it's a pretty well attended reception and remembrance. And hopefully as many of you as can come down to it.
Well, that's just another example of what Roberta and Larry have done. They were instrumental in starting the effort to pay tribute to our veterans, both at Memorial Day and then later in November at Veterans Day. And that's, again, part of their legacy, so very much appreciated.
3 or 4 weeks ago, we had the Vietnam Memorial Service.
And that's kind of a new, well, I don't know if it's a service as much as just simply a remembrance, and those that have been affiliated with the city or still are residents of the city that served in that Vietnam conflict. This has been a reoccurring, let's don't forget our fallen warriors and those that survived during a very, very difficult time in the city's or the country's history. And so I think that's a different kind of format. I think they do that at the museum, whereas the memorial and the Veterans Day acknowledgement occurs in front of City Hall.
They had 5 veterans that came and told their stories, and there is also a Vietnam Veterans Wall in the museum where they have photos of everybody that they could find in Port Hueneme that had served in Vietnam. They have their picture up on the wall as an honor. So there's a lot in that museum. You would not believe it if you haven't been there. So hope you all can get there. Also, I just wanted to bring up a couple things that the council did discuss, not to go into, just to let you know. They mentioned the week of May 15th, which was this last week, was Police Officer Memorial. And I don't know if you, not you, but the audience noticed that on TV in different places there were news stories about this, because it was a nationwide event, and so that was honored. Also is Natural Beach, the National Beach Safety Program, much the same type of thing, talking about things to be aware of. And just like to say that, especially at Port Hueneme, those of you who come from the valley and maybe don't hear everything that goes on here, there are sometimes dangerous tides at Hueneme Beach, and you have to be careful and make sure you're swimming near a lifeguard and with other people, because those tides can be pretty dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. So that is part of what the National Beach Society is trying to work on, and with our beach here, we let people know about it.
So these were proclamations, which the city council does on a fairly regular basis to acknowledge these kinds of important events and tributes. Now, I don't recall if this was discussed during the proclamation for the beach safety, but there's an annual event fundraiser for the Junior Lifeguard Program. I don't recall if it was mentioned in the course of this proclamation, but they've been doing this fundraising activity at the Ocean View Pavilion for several years now, and it seems like it's this time of the year.
It's usually the first week or two of June, and I'll go back and look at
to see if that was actually mentioned or a date was given.
There has been one mention of it, but now is the time we need to bring it up a week or two ahead of time.
Right.
So we'll do that. And they had a luau last year at that.
Correct.
And it was very well attended, and it goes on for 4 or 5 hours, and it's a great time to get together and meet a lot of Port Hueneme residents.
And it's a wonderful cause.
Yeah, it certainly is. Okay, the first major issue that the council talked about was the fireworks ordinance. Excuse me. And Chief Salinas came up and talked about it. And can you review what he laid out how this is going to work?
Well, the whole issue of illegal lighting of fireworks in Port Hueneme has been an issue of growing concern in the community. And since the arrival of Chief Salinas, there's been a stepped-up attention given to enforcing the laws that are already on the books. But one of the tools that he's now brought to our attention is this concept of no hosting of fireworks. What that means is that people that own or control property on on that premises, if there is illegal firework activity, the owner occupant of that premises could be cited for the very violations, and they may not be the ones that actually illegally lit those fireworks. In the past, there's been a problem in being able to really enforce the ordinance prohibiting these kinds of activities because it's so difficult to witness an individual that has violated the ordinance. You light the firework, you throw it, and you leave. And it's very difficult then to find the individual responsible. What this ordinance does is it says those that have parties or individuals they've allowed upon their premises and they fire fireworks, the police are not restricted to just having to identify the individual doing it in the act.
That was a needle in the haystack.
And so this should help. It's just an additional tool for the police department to be able to enforce the rules that are already on the books.
I think the chief said, I don't know, not last year, but the year before, they had one
citation,
and last year I think it went up to 8. If you remember last year up and down a couple of the main roads, they had the signs warning people that there were fines up to $1,000 if you had fireworks. So just be aware that, and the reason this happened was the number of complaints from residents.
Oh, it's been increasing, but like I say, Andrew has made this a priority in his department, and that's why there's been stepped up citations issued. But there's obviously still a lot of work to be done, and this ordinance is intended to make their jobs easier in being able to enforce the ordinances that people expect.
Okay. Thank you. The next thing that came up was another medicinal dispensary was okayed by the city, called Wheelhouse Dispensary, and they came in and mentioned what they plan to do. And the one good thing about all of them so far, they are going to donate a portion of their earnings above the sales, or above, I don't know if it's a sales tax, but above the city tax to go into some type of program at the school, at the city, be it school, be it educational, be it the parks or whatever. So that's a very good thing for the city to have new industry coming in and wanting to be part of the infrastructure of what goes on here and try to make it a better place to live. Yeah,
as you point out, this is above and beyond the development fee that we charge. It's not a tax, it's a development agreement that the city enters into with each of these cannabis operations. And this is above what you're talking about, the community benefit pledge of additional funds or to help sponsor community events is above and beyond the actual revenue that the city receives. What makes this particular application kind of unique is that the applicant owner of the building has envisioned an ultimate build-out arrangement which would be kind of a hub, call it a cannabis hub, that would attract various lines of business associated with cannabis. As an example, for animals, for pets, cannabis is frequently a prescribed medication for animals, particularly those that tend to be hyper, to try to calm them down, as well as for medical purposes. But the idea is to create a hub of like businesses that are based on the concept of how cannabis can be much more than simply recreation in nature or medicinal for those that are dealing with pain management. So I think it's a great business model. I think the city council likewise felt that way. I think we ended up with a 4-1 majority vote, if I recall. So, you know, this is just another step in the evolution of this emerging industry that we're trying to cultivate here in Port Hueneme.
And so far, it's running smoothly. Chief Salinas has reported that they are very happy with the way things have gone and that they're learning. And when recreational comes in, they'll transfer a lot of what they've learned into how to, you know, make it work.
Well, let me give you a real life kind of example for this very business at Wheelhouse and Channel Islands Boulevard. The buildings that are involved in this potential hub right at the corner of Wheelhouse and Channel Islands, that area has been underlit in the past. And there have been complaints and concerns about how that property, and this is long before cannabis came along, you know, is a dark zone and can be, you know, an area of potential crime. And by bringing in this new industry is the opportunity to add additional security, to provide additional lighting in an area that had a pre-existing problem. And that's how we're trying to embrace this opportunity, is a value-added benefit to the community. And that's a really good example of increasing security, increasing safety by virtue of additional lighting, and that's how we approach these projects.
One of the first cannabis dispensaries put in was Freedom First, and it's on Ventura Boulevard. I don't know the proper name of the shopping center there.
It's East Bay Boulevard and Ventura Road.
It's where the 99-cent store is.
Yeah, it's just east or west of that intersection at East Bay Boulevard and Ventura Road.
Right. Chief Salinas has said that area has, again, with the lighting, has been improved. And what is nice is a number of the store owners there have reported to the chief that things are a lot better around there now. They don't have the people hanging around.
The vagrancy, there was that area has been subject to vagrancy, and that is folks that are homeless and have you know, seem to congregate in that area. Well, now that there's stepped up security and lighting, that seems to have been very much reduced. And so that's just the added benefit, the added value of bringing in cannabis as a new you know, line of business. So anyway, yeah, it's a good point to raise. That was the first cannabis operation that was permitted, and from the very day it opened doors, it has been very well received in that regard as being helping pre-existing problems, to correct pre-existing problems.
Just a little sidebar, I pulled in there one day to park to go to another store or something, and there was an officer out in the parking lot, and he came over to me and said, "Hey, hi, how are you? Can I help you? Are you looking for anything in particular?" And I said, "No, I'm just going over here to this store over here." He said, "Okay, great, have a nice day." So that very reassuring to see that they really care about it, and not only is it going to make it safer for the people who visit the cannabis, it's going to be for the whole center.
Well, and I think all of the cannabis applicants have shown that they're very, you know, very concerned and want to be a part of the community, not just to take advantage of the community. They're very community-minded in how they're approaching this. They also know they better do it right because you got one shot at this thing. And if problems arrive or occur at a given location, there's going to be some heavy penalties. And I think that there's an understanding of that. We don't have to continue to, you know, to harp on that. I think that there's clearly an understanding that, you know, a price comes with being kind of in the forefront of this emerging industry, and you better do it right because you're not going to have another chance.
Revoking of the license is up to the city council.
Absolutely.
So that hopefully will keep them on the center line.
Like I said, I don't want, but we do have quality people involved, and that's very, like you say, reassuring. And maybe that's partly you know, as the result of the city being willing to step out in front of the process and embrace these businesses and these entrepreneurs and to work with them so that they can be successful as well as the city. And so we're in it together, and so far so good.
Well, that's what the city spent 9 months doing, looking over ordinances and trying to make the one that would make the selection process very effective.
Yeah.
And have quality people that had the money and the resources and the knowledge of how to run a business.
Well, all that goes into the screening
Right.
process to even allow them to receive a license.
The next item that we covered was the Citizens Advisory Commission, which is going into effect as soon as there are applications being put in for people to volunteer to be on the commission, the various committees, and I think May 25th is the deadline for that, and then the people will be chosen and the committee's formed. And do you have any more update on that? We're just waiting.
No, I was surprised that we got such a little response initially that was put out in February, and we only received 5 applicants interested in being part of this new adventure, a Citizens Advisory Commission. The good news is that by delaying the appointments, we're now double the applications, something like, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that vicinity. So it was well worth putting this back out on the street to make sure that we get a good candidate, a pool of candidates that we can appoint to the commission. I'm just becoming impatient. I want to see this commission up and running because there are a number of issues I would like to, you know, have the council endorse that I put forward that we asked the commission to take a look at. And so hopefully this all come together in the next, certainly the next month. I don't know if it was the end of May, but there'll be some, once the deadline comes, we'll do interviews and then make a selection among those candidates. Hopefully then the commission will be constituted sometime in June.
I think one thing that the council will have to do once the board on that is selected is say, we need you to go recruit people out in the community. And I think that'll work because the people that hopefully we get on the board, they know what goes on in the city. They know who's active, and they can go out and, you know, get volunteers.
Well, I think what makes a Citizens Advisory Commission successful is they need to have a pretty succinct and clear agenda of what is it their task is. You don't want a body to go out, run amok, and creating issues that don't exist. And so it is up to the city to provide guidance as to what they would like the commission to do, the issues that they would like to have them explore. And that's where I say is that I'm anxious to get to that next step of being able to provide that agenda. Hopefully, sometime in the next month to month and a half, we'll be there.
Okay, thank you for the update on that. Another thing I think people will be interesting to hear is that the Navy has approved dredging to take place sometime around February of 2019. I don't have any details on that. Do you know anything about that? Have you heard anything from any of the other council members that maybe have?
Well, just that I understand that yes, we did get approval, or the Navy, the Corps of Engineers got approval for additional sand to be deposited at Hueneme Beach, and of course we're looking forward to the harbor in its dredging operations to expand the basin of the harbor. That dredge material likewise will supplement what the Corps of Engineers do on a biannual basis. So it's looking better this year than where we were like 3 years ago. But you can't let up because we're subject to the congressional appropriations process, and that's a political process, and we have to be on top of it, or we'll find ourselves where we were 3-4 years ago. So it was encouraging. I think that one of the discussion points is now that there is a new harbor director at Channel Islands. Channel Islands Harbor is managed by the county of Ventura, and they're actually in the lead on coordinating sand bypass operations around the mouth of the harbor down to Port Hueneme. And there is a new director, and I think there was a discussion of we'd like to have a presentation, kind of a meet and greet, and give us the state of the harbor sand replenishment operations to the council. I don't know when that might be arranged on our agenda, but hopefully very soon.
Isn't, you said the county oversees it, and our district supervisor is Kelly Long.
Correct.
She's somebody that we need to work with closely to, because the day the dredging starts is the day you want to start working on the next dredging.
It's never ending.
Yeah.
And I know that we can rely on Kelly. I don't know if Supervisor Saragosa, if the actual Channel Islands falls within his district or not, but you know, both of them I'm sure would be very supportive of keeping a watchful eye out for our interests. And why does this is kind of a weird arrangement. You have to go back to when this whole sand replenishment directive became a matter of law back in the 50s and the 60s. The Channel Islands Harbor was part of the rationale for its construction and funding by the federal government was to serve as a sand trap to collect sand that is littoral, that means it's floating down coast, to capture that at the mouth of the Channel Islands Harbor, and then on this biannual basis to just simply pump it around the mouth of the port of Hueneme and deposit it at the Hueneme Beach property. And so because it falls under the jurisdiction of the county, they manage the Channel Islands. They're the kind of the point in working with the Corps of Engineers, working with our congressional reps. But we need, that is the city, the harbor district itself, and with the support of our county supervisors, to keep the pressure on to make sure that we're getting our appropriate share of sand on a regular basis.
Yeah, the waves never stop working. That's,
This is true.
you know, and they work fast sometimes.
Let's see, death, taxes, and waves.
There you go. We just come up with a new saying. Okay, to the final thing that I have down that the city talked about was the strategic action plan. It's been in effect for a year, almost a year and a half now, and it's been very effective in focusing where the city spends their money, what's important to be worked on. And I think the council liked it enough that they said, hey, let's expand it, let's look into the future a little bit more and see what we need to start looking at down the road, because like the waves, the time moves pretty fast, and you have to have these things planned ahead of time if you can foresee them, just because it takes a while to get it, you know, the money and get everything going. And so the council voted on that to look into it and see what they can come up with. And I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of who was it back in history that did the thinking ahead of time? The European guy, that Nostradamus.
Wow, you're really, you're going way back.
Yeah, I went back to the 10th grade, I think I heard about that. But yeah, you know, find some people that can really look in the future and see what we need here.
I think what occurred here was, you know, the action plan is a living, breathing document. It was never intended to be static, it's to be built upon. But initially its focus was very near term. Mm-hmm. And it was largely focused on financial issues of getting the city's financial house in order, so to speak. You know, explore all revenue opportunities that are available, which began, for instance, the city's economic development program. And so I think that there was a desire, and I believe it was an initiative by Mayor Schnapp, that wanted to take that document and broaden its horizon to a much larger or longer range focus, 10 years plus. And I think her request was for a pretty robust citizens-driven community effort that could entail upwards of $40,000 in expenses. And I think the council at large was troubled just simply by the sheer size of the allocation or the magnitude of the effort, particularly in a case where the city is short on cash. And so the way it was left, as I recall, was to ask staff to take a direct internal role in maybe bringing forward initiatives to embellish upon the action plan, maybe include a longer range vision, but not to make it an academic exercise, and rely upon own resources and not allocate those kinds of funds for a much broader effort I think that the mayor was hoping to have. So nobody faults wanting to look down the road, but we have to do it within our resources, our means, and we got to keep an eye on the ball, which is the city's financial challenge, and I think that's how it played out.
Well, who knows what we'll find. I hope it's all good down the road, and we'll have as much hope and work on it as we can, come up with what we have to work with here. So,
correct.
Thanks for the analysis, and thanks for joining us.
Well, if I might, there's a big issue, and I don't know when this particular segment of Hello Port Hueneme Council Review, when it'll be broadcast or posted, but there was a great deal of angst, I'll say, expressed at the council meeting on May 7th regarding the proposed development of property at the vicinity of Surfside Drive and Market Street. And the commentary wasn't necessarily part of the agenda. It was on open forum. I just received my council packet here just yesterday, and this issue of a potential development project and the purchase and sales agreement with the developer that has come forward to work with the city on maximizing the city's assets. Anyway, this item will be on the agenda for this coming Monday, the 21st. Mm-hmm. So I just broadcast that to let people know that this issue is now going to be in the forefront, and I expect that it'll be a well-attended meeting on the 21st, and just want to let people know of that impending issue coming forward. Again, I'm not sure when this will be posted, but I thought at least I'd be, announce that's on the agenda for next week, or next week.
For Monday night, the 21st. I'll tell you what I'd like to do is, we usually have these every 2 weeks or so. If we find out something really interesting or a major happens one way or the other, or nothing happens right away, we'll do maybe a special show and try to get it out really quick so that the people can know right away what's going on and keep abreast of it. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do is make sure everybody knows what's going on. And the more we know, the better off the city will be. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay, and thank you guys for viewing Hello Port Hueneme, and we'll see you in about 2 weeks with another show.
Until then.